Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I'm going to start by simply saying I want to appreciate what you've been doing. I think many of us have concerns about components of the deal. Many of us would like the Monday morning quarterback, but I find it remarkable that some members seem to impugn that you are not there trying to do the best deal possible for the United States of America and for long-term prospects of stability in the region. I may agree or not agree with what you negotiated, and I've got more due diligence to do, but I would never question the approach you took or the dedication that you have taken in this process. And Mr. Zubin, you know, clearly your actions to both administrations working on this brings a lot of history and commitment, and I absolutely believe that you want to make sure that we follow up, in particular on Iranian actions, destabilizing actions in the region. I do want to continue, I think, more something that Senator Sass asked about what would happen if we don't act. There are some who've put forward a theory because that have said that if the United States Congress turns this agreement down, that Iran it would still be in Iran's best interest to go through to implementation date so that, and take down their nuclear stockpiles, assemble parts of their reactors, so that they could still obtain the $50 billion plus and in effect isolate America since the rest of the world would be otherwise aligned. I mean, do you want to comment on that theory, because it is being speculated on a lot?
So, Senator, obviously it's always dangerous to speculate about how scenarios play out, especially highly complex international scenarios like the one you're describing. But I think the point Ambassador Sherman made earlier is really important in this respect, which is it isn't a black or white answer. If the U.S. were to retain our sanctions because Congress rejects the deal, and certainly for our part we would then implement the sanctions as it is our obligation to do, we would still see some international enforcement, whether it's on the oil side, whether it's on the reserve side. That enforcement would begin to erode, especially in the scenario that you're describing, where Iran actually goes through with its commitments in order to isolate us and to show they're now the good actor. They're complying with all their commitments, and the U.S. is the one who walked away. That's a scenario I very much hope doesn't occur. It would be terrible for us in terms of our sanctions, in terms of our credibility. When we exercise these authorities, these extraordinary authorities, we need to be able to do so in a way that's meaningful and where people know we're ready to act. So I very much hope it doesn't come to that, but it certainly would be a situation of weakened leverage. It's not going to be zero, it's not going to be 100%, but it'll be weakened leverage. And the question then is, could we turn weakened leverage into a much stronger deal? And my assessment is no.
Ambassador Sherman, do you have any other comment on that?
I couldn't agree more. My assessment would also be no, that in fact, if we walk away, even if we retain some sanctions capability, and we would of course enforce our laws, the rest of the world will go in another direction, and more importantly, Iran will go in another direction, and the President of the United States, whether it's President Obama or the next President of the United States, will face a very difficult choice.
There's a separate premise. Would they walk away immediately, or would they actually go through to implementation date? We don't know, but it's...
I doubt very seriously if the United States sanctions remain in place, Iran will perceive that we have walked away from the deal and they no longer have to stick with it.
Two questions. Two more questions. I'll try to stay within my time. One is that one of the concerns we've had is the administration did say when Congress put tougher sanctions in, move forward, particularly on the SWIFT notions, using the SWIFT system, there was great reluctance from the administration about us taking that step. I think, in retrospect, taking that step was important and effective and helped tighten down the sanctions. I do wonder if we don't move forward, though, will we be prepared to move forward with the severity of those same sanctions, particularly as we look at sanctioning Bank of India, Bank of Korea, Bank of Japan? Comments on that? And I'd like to get one last question in, recognizing everybody's gone a little over time. But
it's a very stark scenario that you're depicting, because the institutions you're talking about are some of the most significant and fundamental institutions in the international financial sector, whether it's SWIFT, who is the leading messaging company, secure messaging company for banks worldwide, whether it's the largest commercial banks in Korea, India, the Central Bank of Japan. The prospect of us having to use our sanctions authorities against those entities is frightening.
But if Congress, if we chose to reject this, that would be our policy.
It would then be threatening those institutions unless they come along with the U.S. approach on this.
Let me just get my last question. And one of the statements you made earlier, as we kind of, and I think the further explanation on how you got to the 24 days, I was surprised at first about that time. Still have some concerns, but at least I have a little more clarification now. You know, one of the things that you've said, and I think it's an artful process you created with, in effect, the not allowing other members of the Permanent Council in the UN to have a veto, that we, in effect, have a default veto. But what kind of assurance can we really have that our current EU partners and France and the UK, for example, if they have, in Germany, if they have engaged in a major way with Iran on a business basis going forward, that they will stick with us? How do we get more comfort around that?
I think
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for giving me the extra minute.
I think the best comfort is the one that Acting Undersecretary Zubin gave, which is in 2012 we were in the same circumstance where, in fact, Europe had lots of business with Iran. They had a lot of businesses in Iran, and they were very concerned about Iran having a nuclear weapon and moving down that pathway. And so they joined us in enforcement of not only our unilateral sanctions, but put on their own sanctions and multilateral sanctions, and in fact enforced them. And companies like Total and Siemens, Peugeot, Renault all had to leave.
I'd like to hear more, particularly from our European allies, on that matter.
I would urge you to speak with them directly. I think you'll get the right answer you're looking for.